was 20 years ago today that Sega launched its 32-bit console in Japan. No, not the 32X, wise guy. The other one. The real one. The awesome one. Sega Saturn. As we commemorate the anniversary of Sega's wildly unsuccessful, but nevertheless wonderfully entertaining Saturn, let's look back at the games that even today make owning a Saturn a point of pride for true gaming enthusiasts. There were a lot. Guardian Heroes. This high-energy brawler from developer Treasure combined role-playing mechanics with walking and punching, like a beefier, more linear version of River City Ransom. For the cheapskates in the audience, you can get a solid port for Xbox 360, but the original is still the most satisfying way to play. Panzer Dragoon Saga. If you recently inherited a small fortune and were wondering what to do with your new windfall, may I recommend grabbing a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga? At $250 and about 12 hours long, Andromeda Team's fascinating shooter RPG hybrid may not offer a compelling gameplay to price ratio, but you can rest assured that those 12 hours will be absolutely fantastic thanks to Saga's rich atmosphere and intriguing story. Dragon Force. Like all the Saturn RPGs released in the US, Dragon Force is crazy expensive these days. But look at the game you get for your money. A massive strategy RPG quite unlike any other, placing players in control of a huge army that mixes it up with the bad guys across countless battlefields. Saturn Bomberman. Sure, Bomberman is Bomberman, but what if you were to play Bomberman with 9 other people? That's the hook for Saturn Bomberman, an insane multiplayer melee that degenerates into sheer chaos within seconds. Sega Rally Championship. Do you like cars and racing? Well, then you'll certainly enjoy Sega Rally Championship. Sure, it's a pretty old school take on the sport, but that's part of its appeal. Its unpretentious commitment to driving really fast and having a great old time. Plus, as a faithful arcade conversion, it offered a great demonstration of how close Saturn could get to a powerful coin-op experience. Nights into Dreams. While the rest of the world was falling in love with Mario 64, Sega fans were enjoying Nights into Dreams. As perfectly befit the cultural difference between Sega and Nintendo games, Nights offered a brisk, arcade-like experience versus Mario's more measured foray into 3D. Surreal, unique, and twitchily addictive, Nights truly is like nothing else, not even its own sequel. Shining Force 3, the conclusion to the classic Shining Force series. Well, no, not really. Actually, this is the middle portion of the series since there were 2 full additional episodes of Shining Force 3 released only in Japan after this. But if you don't mind getting a somewhat incomplete story and can look past the terrible visuals and even worse voice acting, Shining Force 3 features plenty of the same great strategy RPG action fans had come to expect from its 16-bit predecessors. Legend of Oasis. Another Genesis sequel, Legend of Oasis, aka The Story of Thor, was the follow-up to Beyond Oasis, and it was tragically overlooked for committing the grim late 90s crime of having 2D graphics. But wow, what 2D graphics? It's a classic action RPG in the Zelda style with some solid game design and eye-popping visuals, further proof that Saturn was too good for this miserable world. Fighters Megamix. In contrast to Legend of Oasis, Fighters Megamix looks pretty terrible these days with its blocky visuals and clumsy animation. But appearances aren't everything, and this raucous fighter was the first time a major publisher had attempted a fighting game crossover. Before Smash Bros., there was Fighters Megamix, a fighter with ridiculous personality and rock-solid mechanics. I mean, you could make Sonic brawl with a race car. That's still awesome. And Tempest 2000. Jeff Minter's trippy remix of the arcade classic was originally designed for Jaguar, but since no one owned one of those, Saturn was the place to play it. Fast-paced tube shooter with some seriously psychedelic graphics, Tempest 2000 was arguably the first game to revisit an arcade classic from the golden era and follow it up on its own terms, rather than trying to reinvent it into something different. And as such, it was the inspiration for countless modern retro-styled games, like Geometry Wars and Pac-Man Championship Edition. So those are the games worth tracking down here in the US. Unfortunately, many of Saturn's best games never made their way west. If you really want to get the most out of Sega's 32-bit system, you need to get set up with the ability to play Japanese imports. And then you'll want to save up some dosh to get your hands on these 10 amazing and unfortunately rather expensive Saturn games from Japan. Fortunately, for the most part, no real language skills are necessary. Saturn specialized in action games. Radiant Silvergun, Treasure's legendary shooter. Like the Guardian Heroes, you can also play it on Xbox 360 for a lot less than the import version costs. Dungeons & Dragons Collection, a compilation of 2 great RPG-style brawlers. This too is available on Xbox 360, PC, PlayStation 3, and Wii U. Psychic Assassin Taromaru. Sadly, there's no other way to get this insane 2D action game but to buy the original, which costs about $300. It's not worth nearly that much, but in its defense, it is pretty rad and extremely unique. Dodonpachi. The jumping off point for the bullet hell shooter genre, this game is just as manic and over the top today as it ever was. Elevator Action Returns. A very slick and very 90s sequel to the Golden Era arcade game. You can pick this one up in the US on the Taito Legends collections for PlayStation 2 if you still have one of those around. Dracula X, Gekka no Nocturne. You may know this game better as Symphony of the Night, so why would you want to own this version when it's already available in the US? And this version is actually worse from a technical standpoint. Well, see, my friend, this game has extra content. Namely, you can play as Maria Renard, and she's as much fun in here as she was in Rondo of Blood. Keiō Yugekitai Katsugaki-hin, the sequel to Sega's CD shooter Keiō Flying Squadron, though this one is less of a straight shoot-'em-up than a goofy platformer with shooter segments. But it looks great, and it's loads of whimsical fun. Gotcha. Street Fighter Alpha 3. Inexplicably, this fighter never came to the US on Saturn, but if you have the Saturn 4MB RAM expansion pack, it's the best console port of the game, period. Marvel Superheroes. Likewise, you need the RAM expansion for this one too. But not only is this a great port, the Japanese version has a weird character who never appeared in any other rendition of the game. A guy based on a Japanese comedian. Yeah, it's kinda weird. Princess Crown. And finally, here's one for the fans of Vanillaware. Princess Crown is basically the template for Muramasa, an Odin Sphere, a great-looking 2D action RPG. You'll need some reading comprehension to get the most out of this one, but if the Saturn version is too spendy, you can also find it for much less on PSP, where it came out in Japan only. For more classic gaming essentials, keep reading usgamer.net, and subscribe to our cool YouTube channel.